Hello class 8 students. Today I am going to start a new chapter on history. That is, the name of the lesson is Education and British Rule. Here we will understand that what kind of education prevailed prior to the British rule and what happened when the British came to India and introduced any types of education. The most important thing that can be said that Lord Macaulay, who had contributed a lot in the introduction of Western education in India. Lord Macaulay, he is considered the founder of the British system of education in India, and also he was a law member of the Council of Lord William Bentinck, the Governor General of India. There it can be mentioned that Lord William Bentinck was the Governor General and he was the head of the country. He was the supreme head of the administration of the system of East India Company in those times. Here, before starting, we need to understand that what kind of education prevailed when British came. In India, there were certain institutions like pathshalas and moktabs. The pathshalas were run by the Hindus and the moktabs were run by the Muslims. These educational institution was no better for providing good education in India. These education institutions were only engaged in religious customs and religious rites. They are imparting education from the holy books only. So the children were unable to get further education in India. When the British came, they found that the systems of education was not good, and as a result they wanted to reform the education system in India. In this regards, first of all, we will say that moktabs and pathshalas. Moktabs were run by the Muslims and pathshalas the Hindus. There were some other institutions were there like madrasas and other in pathshalas also. These schools were open schools where they are imparting only religious education. This religious education didn't have any other matters, only in regards to religions, custom, tradition, about their religious faith and worship. So living in a life, worshipping God is not the matter of fact. We need God, we must have faith in God, but also we need some extra education system, otherwise we will not progress in our life in future. So here Lord Macaulay, he was the first to be considered the founder of British system of education in India. Education in India. What kind of education? That is Western education. And here he was also the members of the Council of Lord William Bentinck. According to him, he suggested certain points, he recommended certain points that can be implemented in Indian education system. The first one is that English, that is the language English, should be the medium of instruction in school, because India is a multilingualistic country, and providing books and education in almost all the types of language, it was quite difficult in those times. So we need translation of the books, textbooks, and also we need teacher. So better to convert the whole system of education into English and imparting education in English, and thereby the students, the children can get education properly in English. And also the second point is given that the religious education system were set aside, and the other types of education like literature, science. Literature, here I mentioned that Western literature, like today we are learning English 1, English 2. So in this way he had a very poor opinion of traditional Indian learning system, which he thought was inferior to European learning. That means the Indian system of learning was very poor according to Lord Macaulay. And it was said that Indian system was inferior to European learning. So we need to understand that according to him, single shelf of a good European library was better and what than literature of India and Arabia. So in this regards, that if we had a book on science literature in English, so we will having a small books, and from there we will have very big learning, very much learning. But in Indian system, the learning was confined to only religious rites and customs. So the contribution of Lord Macaulay is worth mentioning, and it is because of him who has suggested this system that we are here getting a good and better education in India. Then again, let's come to Sir Charles Wood. He was also the president of the Board of Control, and the dream of Lord Macaulay was implemented by Sir Charles Wood through his Wood's dispatch. His name was Sir Charles Wood, and he suggested Wood's dispatch. Sir Charles Wood was the president of the Board of Control. He was the president of the Board of Control. And he had an important effect on spreading English learning and female education in India. In those times, the girls were not allowed to go to pathshalas and muktabs. So Charles Wood put effort in instructing the parents of the female to send to the schools for getting education. So in that case, for the first time in India, both the boys and girls were allowed to go to the education, go for education in Western schools. It was in 1854 he sends a dispatch to Lord Dalhousie. Dalhousie, he was also the Governor General of India. Wood suggested that though the primary schools, the children are not acquainted with the Western literature, so Wood suggested that the primary school must adopt vernacular. Vernacular means own language. There are many languages in India: Maratha in Maharashtra, Punjabi in Punjab, Bihari in Bihar, Assamese in Assamese. So these languages which is connected to the state is called as vernacular language. What we speak as mother tongue in our own home, it is called vernacular language. So it is says that vernacular language should be introduced in primary level, and also he says that the combination of Anglo vernacular language in high school. So what is Anglo term the same thing, the Western means English. Whenever the term Anglo is used, you will understand that it is English. That is English and vernacular. Both the English and mother tongue would be used to teach the student of the high school. So in this regard, Anglo vernacular languages were adopted in high school. And finally, English. That means in the college, the education system would be instructed through English medium for education. Now here also we can see in the government operated school that Assamese is used, and in the high school some of the subjects are imparted in English. Basically the literature subject on English. And then if we go to colleges, we will see the higher studies are imparted in English language. That system is still applied in India now. The British had done best developmental activities during the phase, as it was the final phase where the British brought social reform. So it is through this Western education the British had done best development activities. And what happened, what changes have come? The change of social reform. What kind of social reform? The reform says like blind faith. In Hindi we say as andha vishwas. That means without any cause and reason, there are some religious orthodox people used to practice certain kind of blind faith, and this blind faith turns to disasters in the society, in Indian society. So it is because of the Western education system in India, the people were educated properly, and the British brought social reform through this thing. After this period, their policies tended to become reactionaries. When Indian people start getting education, the soft hand of British started to become reactionary. Why is it? This will be discussed later in the chapters. Just I want to make you understand that the people were getting education, they are wiser and they are getting educated, so they now can judge the exploitation of the British in India. And in this way, some of the people started to raise their voice against the British. So whatever it is, Wood Dispatch is called the Magna Carta of English education in India. Wood Dispatch. It is called as Magna Carta. Why it is called Magna Carta? It is called Magna Carta means that what? First of all, we must understand Magna Carta. Magna Carta is such a rule that was practiced by the King of England and the people of England. Whenever the king is subject to some tyranny, that means going against the people, then the king, to prevent the king, as documents have to be signed by the king. This document is known as Magna Carta. In this document, when the king signed that, whenever the king turned tyranny against the people of its own country, so the king would be dethroned from the throne and a new king would be elected by the people. So in England, for the first time, democracy was brought. So in this way, Magna Carta is such a thing that it brought a change in Indian education system, and people get a huge relief in getting their education, and they start judging their own very nature of the British exploitation and where they are living. It is their own country, and the British, they start thinking that the British were foreigners. So in this way, after the Wood Dispatch, several universities, institutions were formed, were established in Bombay, Calcutta and Madras, and it is done after the Wood Dispatch. The British, why the British did this thing? The British did this thing for their own gain. So in this thing, why the British introduced Western education for their own gain, what kind of benefit they would get, they thought to get, will be discussed in the next discussion in the next video. For the time being, I remain. So as I have finished a little part of this lesson, so I want to give you the short answer, that is answer in Roman 3. There are 5 questions, so you can see from this video. That is the first question: what were Lord Macaulay's recommendation to the Indian system of education? The second question is: what were the major recommendation of the Wood Dispatch? The third question is that name the cities where universities were established after Wood's Dispatch. The fourth question: what were the aim of the British in educating Indians? And the fifth question: who were the eminent men behind the National Council of Education? So these are your answers. Next day I will continue the video and try to give you the long answers. Thank you.